Hi, I'm Naina Tekwani, Director of Brand Communications at Desert Financial, and I'm joined today with Kevin Haskew, Chair of the Board. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi, Naina. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for being with us here today.
My pleasure.
I'm excited to sit down, chat with you, get to know more about you, your career, and talk about financial education and your efforts with Desert Financial. Now, can you tell us a little bit about where you're from?
Yeah, so I'm originally from England. I'm actually half Irish. My mum's Irish, so I used to spend my summers in Ireland. And I've been in the States maybe for the last 20 years. And that was because when I was in England, I joined an American company, and that gave me the options to travel globally. And it became clear career-wise that my future was, and the opportunity was in the States. So we moved with the family about 24 years ago.
I'd love to hear about your personal journey with finance and how that got you involved with the board at Desert Financial.
You know, it's an interesting question. The problem is when you're my age now, there's so much history. It can take a long time to go through it. But just a couple of points on that. It goes back to when I was young. In England, I would say we were classed as middle class, but boy, we didn't have any money, and things were tight. And my mum, she every time she did the weekly shop, she went through the receipt and checked every item to see if there was a discrepancy. We had hand-me-downs. She was a knitter, so all my jumpers were all knitted. So we grew up, knowing that money was tight, and you had to understand it, save, and you couldn't have everything if you didn't have the money. And so it was a kind of a good upbringing. And then when I started work, I really appreciated that when I started to earn, my own money. And that you had to sort of think about, well, when can I afford to have a house? I've got to save for that. We all want to go out drinking and partying, but those years have to stop if you want to start to save.
That's true.
So to me, it was kind of an interesting upbringing that I think is foundational, really. And then, of course, with the Irish connection, back then, the island was very poor, and so seeing that side of my family was even harder. And so I was been very careful with money from a young age. And then I think that translated into work when I started working. I've worked primarily with computer systems and then integrated systems across enterprises. So obviously there's a big portion of financials and ledgers. Yeah. And so you really get to understand how the financials work, and then progressing into running a business. And then knowing how to actually run a balance sheet and a P&L, you really have an appreciation for this idea of, even though it's a company, if that was my money, what would I do? So when you start to make decisions for investments, you can't spend. The expression would be like a drunken sailor. Yeah. You've got to really think about, if it was my money, what would I do with this? And the notion of a zero-sum game, that you can't just spend. Yeah. You've got to balance, and a balanced budget, which I suppose is a lot about life. A lot of it comes down to balance and keeping everything in balance.
Yeah, that's so true. What a great experience. It sounds like your mom really raised you with those principles that we're trying to instill with our literacy efforts, around financial industry.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, maybe today it's a little bit easier for people to get access to things, whereas for us, we perhaps didn't have a choice. No. And so it was drilled into you. So maybe that was a bit easier back then, but it didn't feel like it.
That's very true. So what inspired you to get involved with a credit union versus a conventional bank?
That's a good question as well. Some of it might just be luck and availability, but in Ireland they actually have credit unions. In England they're called building societies. But I actually did have building society accounts, and then also banking accounts as well. But back then I saw the difference back then. And it is that subtle difference, but huge difference between member and share owner, And then when I came to the States, obviously I was working for US companies. Big companies, they all had their own credit unions. So default, your salary went into a credit union. So really from day one in the States, I was tied into credit unions. And you really get to see the difference between a credit union and, I'll say, a regular bank. And needless to say, I prefer the credit unions.
I'm with you.
And we say it sounds easy, but it actually is true. Yeah. And I think you actually have to experience it to really believe it. But the member ownership and the member experience is fundamental, and that is the differentiator that I'm pleased to be part of. But two, we need to nurture and then develop and build off that.
I'm with you on that. It's incredible, the community that we've built at Desert Financial, but really it's our members who've helped us build that community. We're filled with such a wonderful group of people.
Well, I feel blessed really to be part of this organization. I didn't do this. It was when I joined. But you can see what happens in the community, the presence, and how people respond to Desert Financial as well. And it's remarkable. And it's that balance of branding, marketing, donations, giving back, volunteering. It's all of that together that really does encapsulate Desert Financial and how it sits within the community. And that's something to be proud of.
I agree. So that kind of ties into the next topic I want to touch on. So just reflecting on your experiences as a whole, what do you believe are the most common financial challenges individuals face today, and how can organizations like Desert Financial really help?
Again, that's a good question, and there's perhaps several answers. I'm perhaps a little bit biased because of my age now, but I actually think it's harder for younger people today, with consumerism and peer pressure and technology, things like online gambling. We didn't have any of that when I was young.
No.
And, I might criticize younger people today, but if I was in their shoes today, the way I behaved when I was young, I would be abusing myself or the systems. I know for sure. So I don't think it's easy today with technology and consumerism. So I think that education and literacy is really important, perhaps more so today than it was, 40, 50 years ago, because of the digital trends.
Yeah, when you think about the ways in which people can shop today, I mean, there's hundreds of different platforms that they can make purchases on, right? When we think of social media and we think of all the apps, and you look at your phone and pick up a game, right? Try to kill a couple minutes on your phone. You can easily spend money, and stuff like that with technology didn't exist back then.
Yeah, well, again, partly it's consumerism, and I think everything's much more available today than it used to be. And then the second vector, though, and perhaps the more difficult one, is speed. Yeah. It's so fast as well. In the old days, you perhaps couldn't get credit, and if you did, you had to apply for it, and you wait for a letter for 3 weeks. And by then you might have changed your mind. Today, it's instantaneous. And the speed is, that I think people can feel pressured to do something or want to do something, and they can get into problems very quickly. And so I think the technology and speed are the two challenges in that this generation really has to deal with.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. I mean, I have young children. I have 2 boys myself. My oldest is about to turn 4, and I think of the instant ways you can buy items and they arrive literally same day at your door or the next day, right? A lot faster than we've ever experienced in time. And he is used to being able to pick up my phone and say, "Mommy, I want a box of planes." And guess what? We buy it, it arrives, right? Yeah. It's crazy the speed at which we can spend money. And one of the things I love about Desert Financial, which I'm sure really ties in with your experience, is how we are so focused on educating this next generation, right? Setting them up for success, especially at a young age. And I think one of the things we do well is that we provide a lot of information and education to parents, and we're filled with a community of people that want to pass that down and really set their children up for success too.
Absolutely. It's a bit like a dichotomy though, and you get conflicted.
Yeah.
Because on one side we need to compete, and we have to provide the same platforms and accessibility. But then we have a duty as well to come from the other side and actually talk about some of the dangers and make people aware of that. And then, or if they're having problems, talk about literacy and the ability to help. And it's that back to balance again. Yeah. Whereas I think if you're in it more for profit, it's easy to push the technology and not focus too much on the well-being.
Yep.
And that's when you get into the mis-selling a little bit. And so, again, that's balance, and then the difference between a credit union and a bank.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you're nailing the biggest difference, right? We really look at well-being and, people's relationship with money and how we can support them versus just saying buy, use, right? It's a much different mindset, and we look out for our members, which I think is so important.
But we're still developing, those technologies and having similar solutions, but with a caveat as well, the wellness as well.
We have a long way to go, but, I think we're really invested in supporting our members throughout that journey.
Yeah, and it's a journey. You said it, you can't, it's not a transaction, it's not a one-off thing, it's a journey. Yeah. And it's more just the how we go about presenting that as well. But it's very, I think it's imperative that we keep that education going and the communication of, this is good, but there are some pitfalls, there are some dangers. We want to make you aware of those, and we'll help you navigate through that as well. We don't want to create fear. No. We don't want to turn people off. We want to encourage, but also help people navigate.
Yeah. So speaking of journeys, you've had quite the career journey yourself. You've worked with some incredible corporations on Semiconductor, Biomet, Allied Signal. How has your experience across these diverse companies influenced your position as a board member here?
Yeah. I'm so thankful for the journey I've taken. I'd like to say it was planned, but it really wasn't. It was a natural progression. But when I look back, I've been blessed. Actually, working for US corporations was a big change for me, which really helped. Working for large organizations has helped, but more importantly, global as well. So I've had the pleasure of traveling around the world, living in different countries, in different continents. And so you really get to understand culture, corporate culture, and then local cultures, and see that as well. So, I think that experience for me has been invaluable. And then seeing how large corporations work from an accountability reporting compliance standpoint of view is important. And I spent a lot of time with public boards and that standard of accountability as well. And so you put it all together after 20, 30, 40 years, it really does stack up for some great experiences that now is the time for me to be sort of sharing that and giving back.
Yeah. You know what I love about that is, you think of us as a credit union. We're based in Arizona, right? Where, the majority of our base is here. But when you think of Arizona as a state, we have just boomed with growth. And, I think out of every 5 people I meet, at least 2 or 3 are from another place or like you, another country, right? So it's great to have that global perspective and that insight from your experiences across the board, but then be able to bring that to our company and help us elevate as a brand too. I think we wouldn't be doing ourselves any favors if we only looked at our member base under the lens of Arizona, because Arizona is becoming so diverse in that sense with people moving here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very easy to become myopic and shut out certain viewpoints as well. So I do like, within the credit union, I like the openness, the desire to want to learn and adapt as well. And I think your point's valid as well. It's a state. We have a state charter for the credit union, but Arizona is built up with so many people of different nationalities and snowbirds as well. That diversity really does differentiate it from what we perceive to be a normal state. Yeah. And so I think having that perspective is really, is good.
Yeah, it helps bring, just helps meet these people with the needs that they have at any given time, right?
And then the interesting thing is people come in with different experiences and then different expectations as well. And so you get to see a lot more than you would with just a very narrow, myopic view as well. So again, my experiences, I think, help there as well. In that, my lens is a lot, it's more like a 360 vision and that does help.
Yeah, that's incredible. I was also thinking about how, there's a shift in what people are looking for with their financial institution, and they're moving from the traditional bank themselves. I think we see that with people coming here and finding credit unions like us, right? And so when you think of that global perspective and the companies that you've worked at, the experience you've had almost aligns with those multi-state, multinational corporations, right? Such as these traditional banks. But then really once they come to Desert Financial, they get that tailored, customized, personalized service. And I think that's what really sets us apart.
I speak to Jeff about that all the time because the credit union is changing. And we do have to think like a large organization because we have many tentacles and we serve such a diverse population as well. And I think, but that's a positive though, that is. And I think you're right though, and that's an important differentiator. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Really is. So it kind of ties me to one of the other questions I want to ask you. So technology and finance, couple topics we've just really touched on. What would you recommend to young adults looking to increase their financial well-being when it comes to technology and finance?
Maybe before we get into that, it's worth mentioning to everybody as well that when I started here with Desert Financial, maybe end of 2017, it was really with SwitchThink Solutions. So because of my background as a corporate CIO, it was a good fit as SwitchThink was getting started to bring in somebody with my experience to be on the board working with Scott Butler. So I think that's helped as well, both me and then also SwitchThink and then Desert Financial. The technology really it's so important now to all of us, and it plays an important role. But it's back to balance again. And so I think we have to understand where technology is, where it's going to. We need to try to be at the forefront, but maybe just hang back a little bit and learn from other people's mistakes. But then very quickly we've got to be communicating to everybody, again, to talk about benefits but also pitfalls. And I do think we have an obligation to tell people, particularly younger people, very early on, protocols. Do this, but don't do that. Be careful of this as well. I would say some of the banks, when they push out technology, they really they don't have any safeguards.
No.
And they're really looking for that sell, and then they're not really concerned about the impact on the recipient or the consumer. And again, back to that differentiator. So I think that's what we've got to do with the younger people with technology, is embrace it, use it, support it, but also educate.
Yeah, that's so important. So if someone who's consuming a lot of this technology, right, just where they are in life, maybe they're experiencing some of those pitfalls that we've talked about, right? What advice would you give to them concerning financial literacy initiatives on, if they're feeling overwhelmed or intimidated, how can we support them? Whether we are their credit union or not, how can we help these people?
Yeah. A lot of it is about communication, and there's different methods for that. I'm really thrilled that we managed to do the deal with ASU and then working with Northern Arizona, because that changes our demographic and gets us into the younger population as well. So that's where we not only can we talk about it, we're actually doing it. So we actually this is real for us, and so we need to not only confront it but deal with it. So I think the answer there, though, is that we've got to make sure, particularly the young or people new to banking, they know they can ask somebody. Don't be afraid to ask, because a lot of people like to hide problems.
They do. People don't want to talk about it.
Well, and it's human nature.
Yeah.
It happens at work. But getting people to actually put their hands up and say, "Hey, I need help," is it's easy to say, hard to do.
Yeah.
But that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
And it happens. Everybody's different as well. But making sure that we communicate that we're here to help. If people have problems, reach out. But encouraging peer groups to talk, and if they see somebody struggling, that's another avenue as well. Advertising, there's all channels we need to be using to get people to know that we are in this industry, we're experts, and we want to actually help.
Yeah, we're here to serve them.
Correct.
It's interesting you bring up the ASU partnership. I'm personally very excited because I think we can help make such a difference in the mindset of these individuals who are about to start earning money, right? And I think of myself when I was that age, and it's a slippery slope, right? As you start to, if you don't have that insight and maybe the knowledge that you have about budgeting, right, from a young age. But one of the things that I thought was so interesting we've learned with our partnership recently is majority of 18 to 22-year-olds, when they're thinking about engaging with their first financial institution, they want to come into a branch. And what I love about Desert Financial is we make that so easy for them. They can come to us, they can bring up those concerns, and we can walk them through that process. I think it's so different when you think about that demographic because they grew up on technology, right? They were pretty much born and cell phones were already out. And I would have guessed that at first they would probably want to sign up online, but it turns out they still want that support. And I think we really offer that, which is such a great differentiator versus going to a big bank.
No, absolutely. It's fascinating, though, isn't it? And it's wonderful. So the notion of the call, it was a few years ago, but the call, click, come in strategy, it was absolutely spot on. Whereas again, some people just went all in with, we're an online bank, we don't do anything else. Well, you can't have that. People still want to make calls to a call center, but a lot of people, it's proven now, want to go in and have a conversation. For different reasons, and to actually still have branches and invest in that and promote that is great. And you're right, talking to people is what we need to be doing. Outreach programs is essential as well, and we've got to be leading that charge in terms of education. Absolutely. And particularly for the young, where I actually think it's great with the technology that younger generations can use all this technology. We just need to make sure they're aware of some of the dangers, the pitfalls, and that there's a safe way to use this effectively. And we want to help them. Yeah. Not only help them, though, we want to understand. Yeah. Because that's going to help us with our future developments as well. So, that becomes a great learning opportunity for ourselves.
So this is tying into the next topic I want to shift to. I want to know a little bit more about what inspires and motivates you to stay involved with the board at Desert Financial. I have a feeling it has to do a little bit about financial literacy and education, right, and helping people. That's my presumption, just knowing you. But, can you share more with us about why it is so important to you to stay involved and really support this next generation as they enter into the financial world?
Yeah, I think first of all it's more to keep the brain engaged and not just slowly fall over and die. And this notion of giving back as well, I think is important, really is. It's nice. I actually like to see the different generations of people and the thought processes and having all that mixed together as well. But also I can see with technology how it goes through different stages. We're at a stage, though, where I think education is really important as well. And so I am interested in that, in terms of how do we embrace technology, but also make sure we do it in a safe and secure way as well. And obviously, without being derogatory, younger people, when you're new to technology or industry, you don't know. No.
They just don't have the life experience.
They don't have the experience.
Yeah.
And so it's not I'm not slamming them.
Yeah.
You don't have the experience. And so we're just trying to point out some of the potential pitfalls and dangers, because it's, again, back to that notion of speed. It's very easy to get into a problem now, much faster than it was 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, I agree. So,
that's what I think fascinates me. And then also an organization that is growing and developing. I always like that. Yeah,
well, great to hear. I'm happy to learn why you love this organization, and I think you can probably clue us in a little bit on, what is the future of Desert Financial and how we will be shaping the financial landscape to come for generations to come.
Yeah. So you mean after I've gone?
After maybe all of us, right? I think the hope, look, we're about to hit 85 years, right? I imagine there's at least another 85 years, hopefully more ahead for, this great organization. And, what impact do you think Desert Financial will have for those subsequent future generations?
Yeah, well, first of all, let's hope, we're around in 85 years' time. I won't be here to see that. And goodness knows, with extrapolation, goodness knows what it would look like in 85 years' time. But in the near term, though, it's a continuation of what's happening today. Growth is important, so continue to grow. Spread around the state, I think, is important as well. What we're doing in northern Arizona is exciting. And then, what we're doing with demographics as well and changing that profile, I think is really important. Technology clearly is important, and there's a lot of interesting things on the horizon for online banking that we want to make sure we stay close to and bring in. And then, just growing the organization in terms of skill sets. But the thing is, though, maintaining the culture, the mindset of wanting the member focus, helping members, keeping that ethos whilst we grow is, one, important, and two, always a challenge for any organization. It's easy to grow and to say we're going to grow, but if you're not careful, you can lose what got you there.
Agreed.
And that's the critical thing. And I suppose that's where I can make, my experience helps out as well. Mm-hmm. It can be done. Mm-hmm. We're going to do it, but it doesn't. You've got to plan for that.
Yeah.
So I think the future's bright.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some great. There's a good strategy in place. I think there's some good ideas and opportunities. We've just got to really maintain that focus on members, mm-hmm. Member wellness. Mm-hmm. And use that to help us get to the next level.
Yeah, I really look forward to seeing how we can continuously shape these generations, to set them up for success as they come into, their first jobs, their first homes, their first cars, and, see how they're able to set themselves up for success over the long term with our financial literacy initiatives.
Yeah, and again, it's that's a challenge for everybody. But, it's how you execute it. Mm-hmm. So we're going to do it better than everybody else. I always throw caveats in, though, as well, because we can get myopic. Mm-hmm. We don't want to be talking all the time just about the young and then have disenfranchised seniors, me being one. So there's different things we can be doing for every generation, and we need to. So it's a total package. And we've got to now, so we're just expanding the reach, which is a good thing.
Agreed.
Rather than being seen just as the old style credit union.
We don't alienate anyone, I think, is what's important in what we're doing.
Yeah, and then also with what we're doing with the branding as well, is that building a reputation in the state. We want to be seen as the leaders. We want people to learn from us as well. And it is always competitive, but so we need to make sure that we use that to keep us honest and to drive us. But we should be setting the standard and be seen as the standard bearer within the state of Arizona, the benchmark for not just credit unions but for banking and how we actually work with individuals and members.
Agreed. Well, I hope our members see us that way. I'm sure many do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to seek feedback on and keep building on it. Mm-hmm. And that's where we need to listen. Mm-hmm. So I'm big on that as well. Mm-hmm. So again, back to my upbringing. My parents used to tell me, you're born with 2 ears and 1 mouth.
What a clever saying.
So you've got to listen to your customers, listen to your members, listen to what's going on, and use that to help keep moving forwards.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, thank you. It's been wonderful chatting with you today, learning about your career, your passion for financial literacy, and your involvement with Desert Financial on the board. I want to ask you one final question. What is your favorite thing about Arizona?
Actually, if you say one thing, I'm going to say the scenery.
Yeah.
Arizona, people straight away think of desert, cowboys, and it is a desert. The Sonoran Desert's very colourful, but if you go north, you get pine trees, altitude, snow,
gorgeous up north,
mountains, and so it's a very varied state. And I must admit, I love it in Arizona. And I wasn't born here, but I consider myself an Arizonan.
That's how I am too.
But the scenery, for sure.
Yeah, it's an incredible thing. We're very fortunate.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Anytime.